Is it toxic? How to identify and what to do if you're involved in a toxic relationship. Let's face it, relationships and having conversations with others can often be tough. But when another person is toxic, having to communicate is even more of a challenge. Today, we have a very special guest, Dr. Heidi Brocke, a toxic relationship awareness and healing specialist. And we talk about what is a toxic relationship, how to spot one, and what to do if you're involved in one from any type of relationship. So stay tuned to this episode of the Go Reflect Yourself podcast. Hi there, my name is Heather J. Kreider, and I welcome you to the Go Reflect Yourself podcast. I'm here to bring you real, practical, brain-based strategies helping you transform your life one thought at a time. Working hard and staying busy will only get you so far. To truly become happy, content, and who you're meant to be, you have to move beyond physical capacities and look from within, allowing you to overcome those obstacles and barriers. My mission is to help inspire you to take massive action to transform your life, all starting from the inside out. I invite you to watch or listen to this podcast and share it with others who you feel can also benefit from it. I invite you to join my free Facebook group, Beat Burnout. That's where we provide more practical neuroscience and mindset strategies, helping you reduce stress, anxiety, and overcome overwhelm. Thank you so much for being here. I'm honored and grateful for you.
You are stronger than you believe. You have greater powers than you know.
So Dr. Heidi is one of my dearest friends, and I'm honored today to bring her on this podcast. And let me tell you just a little bit about how amazing she is. I'm going to read some of her bio for you so I don't botch it up. But Dr. Heidi, as a toxic relationship awareness and healing specialist, has turned her past into her passion, as she provides hope, healing, and freedom to those who have been affected by toxic relationships, emotional abuse, and narcissist behaviors. After 24 years in healthcare, she's now moved on and uses her life experience and education to be the person she needed to be when she herself was trapped in the darkness of an unhealthy relationship. Through education, she presents the understanding needed to empower others to walk through fear and into their freedom. She's been featured in Forbes and Time magazine, and she has a podcast titled, Is It Toxic? And she has reached 1 million downloads on that podcast worldwide. And her mission is to educate as many as she can on the effects of emotional abuse. So welcome to the podcast, Dr. Heidi.
Thank you. It's finally time. We've been trying to schedule this for ever.
Well, you're too busy helping and change the world. So I'm glad that you were able to find a little bit of smidgen of a spot in your schedule today.
It was probably the default of I know her and my schedule's filling up. So we'll move it again.
That's okay. It happens. I'm just glad we're here today together. So as I mentioned, I've known you for a bit and I started thinking about it. I've known you now for about 11 years and I've witnessed your evolution and what you've done to educate others on toxic relationships and emotional abuse. But the ironic thing, Heidi, is that as I was learning more about your story and what you were focusing on, I started realizing, oh my gosh, so many of the relationships I've been in have been toxic and emotionally abusive as well. And I didn't really understand that. And I didn't understand the effects that it had on me. And I think what I thought was that toxic relationships meant that it had to be physically abusive relationships to kind of qualify as this big word. So I really think that might be a great place to start is, and I know this is a huge, huge question, but what is a toxic relationship?
Oh, so this is where everybody goes and gets a drink and some popcorn and because here we go. I always tease that be careful because I can talk till Tuesday on this. So just for the record, I always like to make sure that everybody that's listening knows I am not a licensed mental health care professional. My doctorate comes from a doctor of chiropractic and acupuncture. So those of you who are using a therapist or a counselor, anything I say, do not necessarily replace it because I don't treat and I don't diagnose mental health. Now, I can diagnose if you have a sore neck. But I just like to be very clear on that because I am much more of an educator in this category than someone who, is treating a mental illness. So what is toxic? I always question where I should begin when somebody asks me that, because, that's like asking somebody to explain how, a rocket ship launches or something, because there's a lot that goes into it. So I always make sure that when people think of toxic, I give my definition of how I view it so that the clients that I help and the people that are listening know which perspective I'm coming from. I chose the word toxic 7-8 years ago when this started developing into a business. And I chose the word toxic before it was everywhere on social media. And the reason I chose the word toxic is because toxic is not a diagnosis. Toxic is an adjective that is used to describe any relationship that you are in the status that it's in, that is unhealthy for you mentally, physically, or emotionally. So toxic can be anything from something very mild, like a bully on the playground, all the way up to, the toxic relationship I was in, the type of toxic relationship some of my clients are in, some of the things you see on the news. And so there's a broad range of what can be toxic. Toxic is also a little bit tricky because someone who is toxic to you may not be toxic to somebody else. And I think that's the line that's difficult for people to understand, because it's actually, they're toxic to you because your personalities don't fit together because of the goals within the relationship that you have. Mm-hmm. So what is toxic? What does toxic look like? Let me see where to start.
Maybe can I interrupt?
I should say is toxic relationships. When we think of toxic, because you said it in the intro, you said you think of it as being like a domestic violently,
exactly,
relationship. And because they're at so many levels, the other thing you have to understand is when we think of an unhealthy relationship or an abusive relationship, our minds automatically go to the intimate relationship. Mm-hmm. And when we talk about toxic, it could be a friendship. It could be a coworker situation. It can be a social circle situation. It can be family. It can be, close family, and it can be distant family. And basically what I teach is you get to decide in your life who is healthy for you and who is not. And on top of that, you get to decide which circle they're in your life. If they're not in your inner circle, then, where are they? Because if it is an intimate relationship and it is toxic, the goal is to separate or divorce and to get this person out of your life on every level you can, and then learn how to interact with them so that it doesn't affect you. Mm-hmm. And sometimes if there's not kids involved, it can be a clean cut. It can be and you never have to, be involved with them again. But if there is kids involved, or if it's a family member, or if it's a coworker situation where you have to be in it every day, you need to learn how to handle yourself within those situations so that the toxicity and the toxic behaviors of that person don't affect you in your life. Mm-hmm.
I think that's a really good point, because like I said, as I was really watching your evolution, and I knew most of your story, but obviously not all the intimate details. But then I started realizing family members, past co-workers, not just intimate relationships. I was married prior as well. And so I realized there was a lot of unhealthy behavior in that former relationship. But what I didn't fully understand is the impact of the various relationships and also how friendships, it became a common thread for me. And this is very difficult for me to admit because I don't really, and I'm still processing it. I mean, you can tell right now just in thinking about some of the friendships I've had. And then I realize I attract some of these people too. And we'll talk about that later. That's a much, much bigger part of the conversation. But I think I want to circle back to that point of it can look differently depending upon that type of relationship. So coworkers, that's not, I really want to kind of start there because a coworker isn't somebody you can completely separate that relationship from. That's somebody that you're kind of forced to see. You're forced to communicate, especially if it's a close coworker or a boss even. Mm-hmm. So let's talk about that a little bit and how that might show up for someone and how that might affect them.
Okay, I think that we have to lay a little groundwork before we go into that, because otherwise people are trying to, sift through this with still not understanding. And if you don't mind, I think I'm gonna go back just a little bit of why I ended up doing this, if that's okay.
Yes, please.
So,
yes.
So I was raised on a little dairy farm in the mountains in Montana. And my community was very tight knit. It was a small religious community and everybody knew everybody and everybody knew everybody's kids and everybody, watched out for everybody. And everybody went to the same church and we all went to the same school. So for the first 18 years of my life, I saw the same people, and being a dairy farmer's daughter, we have to be there for the cows. So we never even left. Right. And
the
so
cows toxic.
What?
Were the cows toxic?
I thought they were because I was like, let's go do something. I was a big explorer and, we could never do that. We could if my dad would get up and milk early, we had time to get in the car and get into the west entrance of West Yellowstone and get to Old Faithful and watch Old Faithful go off and then be able to get back home so he could do the evening milking.
Oh my gosh.
So once a summer, that was our vacation, was to do one day between milkings and go see Old Faithful.
Wow.
But anyway.
So pretty sheltered.
Yeah. And yeah, very sheltered. And, I'm the only one of my family that has moved out of that area. And now that I've been, I like to say exposed to real life, which they would hate it if they knew I said that. But when I look back, the community is it's
sheltered.
It's the same. So when I left to go to grad school, I thought everybody in the world was like that because why would they not be? That's all I had ever seen, and it was in grad school that I met my former husband. And I'm not going to get into that because anybody who's been in a toxic relationship, we don't have enough recording time to, record that story.
Yes.
But basically, what happened. Well, let's talk about this because you were talking about a target. Okay. I went into healthcare. So what does that tell you about me? Mm-hmm. Okay. None of you know me at all, but if I was going to describe my personality, and I'm not tooting my own horn, but my personality is driven by emotions. Yep. I'm caring, I'm giving, I'm the fixer, I'm the supporter, I'm the helper, I'm the peacekeeper, the fire putter outer, the conflict avoider. I'll fix anything for everybody and I'll be right here if you need me. Yep. Because people don't go into service-oriented professions unless that is what drives them and fulfills their life, right?
And that describes a large number of people.
Yes, a large number of people. And that's how we were born. That's just how we're wired. It is what it is.
Yep.
And when we talk about the toxic personality is driven completely different. Okay, so let's just say, I'm just going to use my relationship as example. Mm-hmm. And at the beginning of the relationship, everything at the beginning of every relationship is good. Yeah. It's all butterflies and it's all learning and, it's all that kind of stuff. And I very quickly started feeling like I didn't really want to be around this person. But because I am emotionally driven, the third date, no, thank you. Ask again, no, thank you. No, by the seventh time they ask, we don't want to be the bad guy. We don't want to be the one that looks like I'm mean. So, okay, fine. And that's really how it continued to go until all of a sudden I was married. I had a baby. I then had graduated, had a practice, had another baby. Then he quit his job, came into the practice with me. We bought a huge piece of land. And that was about the time that I started feeling the shift of, I am not comfortable here. Something is not working. Something is not right. Well, okay, by that time, you've got so many strings attached and you've got so much tied in, and we've got kids and we've got money and we've got all this stuff that ties us together. So me, the fixer, the supporter, the fire putter outer, the conflict avoider is going to go, okay, how can I change myself so I can fit better and feel better in this relationship?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah,
so
because it's got to be you, right?
So
you've got to be the one.
Yeah. And, through the relationship, you try to communicate and you start being very programmed to realize that it's not the toxic person, it's you. So I jump on this treadmill of, I'm going to do better. I promise I'll fix this. I'll do this. I'll make you proud. I just want you to accept me. Mm-hmm. And so I just started adapting. And I always tell people, if you are changing who you are to become what they need, or if you're changing who you are to fit better into a relationship, you are settling.
I would like to interrupt this podcast and invite you to a money mastery workshop I have coming up real soon. If you're honest, and we're honest about money affects all of us every single day. Most of us have a lot of stress because of money. We cannot leave our houses or even be in our houses without doing or thinking about something connected to money. However, have you ever thought about your relationship with money? Is your current financial life where you want it to be? Does your financial life affect other areas of your life and causing more stress? Likely the answer is yes. And regardless of your income or your financial situation, you likely might also be shackled by money and even avoid having money conversations. The Money Mastery Workshop will teach you how to approach the mindset of money, how to reprogram your thoughts, your feelings, and your beliefs around money and where they come from so you can eliminate fear, doubt, and worry. The idea is to understand that making money is easy and having an abundant life is easy when you know the thinking and the mindset behind money. So head over to heatherjkreider.com/money-workshop to sign up for the next workshop, which is coming up April 21st. Permanently free yourself from financial insecurity and start attracting the money, abundance, freedom, and lifestyle you desire and deserve. April 21st is the next workshop. Head over to heatherjkreider.com. There is a top banner to sign up, or heatherjkreider.com/money-workshop. Okay, I'm going to resume back to the scheduled podcast.
But when I look back, I already had all this stuff that had us so attached that I felt like I didn't have an option, because now we have a family unit and I still have these big dreams of this, perfect life. And so you just keep throwing things into this and trying to build it all the time in the back of my mind. I'm thinking, this is not what it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
And what that goes down to, because you had said it earlier, the goals in the relationships with people with different personalities are different. Okay. And in the beginning, when I say they, I'm talking about the toxic personality. Okay. Mm-hmm. They love everything about you in the beginning. Mm-hmm. They love your hair. They love that you're financially independent. They love that you have a good friend group. They love how you dress. They love, your body type. They love blah, blah, they love everything.
And the attention feels good.
Yeah. Yeah. And so you think, oh, they love everything about me. They're never going to ask me to change anything. And so you have these relationship goals in your head, and the emotional driven person is going to have relationship goals like companionship, partnership, building a life together, growing closer, intimacy, emotional connection. And somewhere in the beginning of the relationship, you say or you portray that these are your relationship goals. Mm-hmm. Okay. And the toxic personality will say, oh, that's exactly what I want. That's exactly what I want. I'm so glad. I've been waiting to meet you my whole life, and that's exactly what I want. So we start down this relationship road thinking, We're headed towards the same goal. Okay. And in reality, if the toxic personality told you what they really step into relationships for, we would say thanks, but no thanks. So they have to lead us to believe that our relationship goals are the same.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So we know that our relationship goals are all of the emotional stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Connection, the ones I just listed, connection, partnership, intimacy, emotional support, all of that.
But at the end of the day, most people, regardless of your personality type, those are common threads. They just really want human connection.
And that's the thing that I teach, because Heather, you and I are programmed very, very similar. So when we see somebody misbehaving or we see somebody treat somebody bad, what is the first thing we think? Why can't they just act normal? Like, why can't they be nice?
Yeah.
Right. So we continually try to look for ourselves in these other people.
Yeah.
And then we can't understand why they can't be normal and they can't be nice.
Yeah.
Okay. What I realized, and I have to tell you, I did not realize this till I was already out of what ended up being a 14-year relationship. Yeah. And I was able to look back, which is exactly what I do. If I had the education that I have now while I was in it, it would have looked completely different. And so that's what I give my clients, is the education that I wish I would have had in it. And so what you have to start realizing is the goals are completely separate. So if their goal is not companionship and partnership and intimacy and emotional support, what is it? The toxic personality in general, whether it's the bully on the playground or it's the type of person that I actually ran away from after 14 years, the thing that drives the toxic personality and the thing that motivates their behavior and the thing that they step into relationships for is security in themselves. Okay, now anybody who's listening who has been involved in a relationship like this, there's probably been a time that you thought, geez, they act really insecure. Okay, but we cannot say that to a toxic personality, because most of us would have a fight on our hands, because the toxic personality only knows what they know. They don't believe that there's anything wrong with the way that they treat people, because that's all they know. While all we know is how we function. So we see the world through how we relate to the world. So when we say, why can't you just be nice? Why can't you just be normal? The toxic personality does not compute that, because they only see the world through everybody here, and everything in my life is here to make me feel more secure in myself. So when we talk about target, if we've got somebody who's seeking things like, what makes somebody feel secure? Control, power, attention, admiration. So if we have somebody over here who is seeking self-security through things like control, power, attention, or admiration, what personality type are they going to go after that's going to supply them with those type of things? Oh, the kind, caring, giving, loving, conflict avoiding fire putter outer. Right? So when you say, I started looking at relationships in my life and I feel like I'm attracting them, 100% your personality is attracting them, because the goals in the relationship are different and they can get what they need from your personality faster and more effectively than they could get it from somebody who is more like them. It's a lot. I know.
So I'm just sitting here thinking, people who are probably listening or watching this right now have a million questions. And like I said, I've heard you talk about this for years now. And every single time we have a conversation, especially this in depth, I immediately replay situations, events, relationships in my head. And it makes me realize too, and this, part of the evolution I've personally and professionally gone through, and that's the name of this podcast, Go Reflect Yourself. Everything for me comes back, and we're really approaching people from different angles. But that's why I had to go and really look at myself. And I had to say, okay, what are the skills and tools I need first to understand who I am? And second, then how do I deal with the world? And to your point, when people are not like us. And that can be a very scary thing when people don't think and respond emotionally you really do wonder what's wrong with me, what's wrong with them, how the heck am I supposed to interact with these people?
Mm-hmm.
So coming full circle back to you, I know there's a million questions and I'm really kind of looking at the clock and trying to honor your time and we could go, like you said, till 2 Tuesdays from now on all of this. But I think the most important question is, because these personalities tend to be controlling, I think about competition. So high achievers, people in the workplace, people who want a lot of goals in their life, they tend to be very competitive, myself included. But when you have somebody that has that competitiveness and then control on top of that, and that insecurity and that need to kind of have people mold to them, this is a big question.
Mm-hmm.
How do you deal with that?
Okay, so here's another spot that I have to back up quick. There's so much groundwork that goes behind this. When I talk to clients, let's just say, I'm going to use the intimate relationship as an example.
Mm-hmm.
Let's just say somebody gets a hold of me and says, okay, this is what's going on in my marriage, and I don't understand it, because toxic personality traits are very confusing.
Mm-hmm.
And so what we have to be able to do is we have to be able to quit paying so much attention to their behavior. This is what they say. This is what they do. Okay. If you are in a long-standing relationship that's unhealthy for you, we get very programmed to continually pay attention to what they say and do,
Mm-hmm.
because we're the conflict avoiders. We don't want to make them mad. We don't want to upset them. We don't want to disappoint them. So we are continually looking at them to anticipate their behavior so we can stay one step ahead.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
For
so
our own security and safety.
Yes. And it's a survival mode type thing. Okay. If they're going to do this, then I'm going to do this to stay safe. And if they're going to do this, then I'm going to do this. And if they come home and they act like this, then I know that I have to act like this. So, so we are constantly paying attention to their behavior. And what I found out is we have to stop looking at the things that they say and do. And we have to ask ourselves, what is motivating this behavior? Because if we just pay attention to what they say and do,
Mm-hmm.
it is absolutely way too confusing to figure out. Now, like myself in my former relationship, logically, I looked at, from a logical perspective, I could look at this relationship every single day and go, this is not healthy for me.
Yeah.
But as soon as my emotions got involved, it clouded my logic and made everything so confusing that I just thought, okay, I guess I just better change. So what we have to do in order to understand their situation for what it really is we have to be able to see what motivates their behavior and be able to think the way they think in order to understand why we respond to them the way we respond to them. Mm-hmm. So an example is, and this is probably still me, because this is still how I'm programmed, and it's probably 90% of the people that I work with. When I get up in the morning, my feet are already on fire. Mm-hmm. Because I have clients, I know there's 15 emails, I've probably got 20 texts on my phone. I've got a husband who wants coffee. There's a horse that needs to be fed. My daughters are calling me because one works night shift. So one's on her way home from work, and so immediately when I get out of bed, I am already doing this. I'm going to make sure that everybody in my life is good today. Right? As long as everybody else is okay, then I'm okay. Mm-hmm. Okay. The toxic personality gets up in the morning and basically says, how am I going to feel secure today? Mm-hmm. Okay. And we have to start understanding that in order to understand how we have been programmed to respond to that. Mm-hmm. And when they get up in the morning, how are they going to feel secure today? Actually, Heather, I'm going to ask you a question. When was there a time in your life that you felt like your life was going the way you wanted it? You were super secure in your life. What were the things in your life that made you feel like that?
I'm trying to choose that answer very, very carefully. Now you're putting me on the spot.
Some people go, I don't even remember a time.
Yeah, I can actually answer that. It's when I had less strings attached where I could fulfill. Obviously, my kids are different, right? It's a different type of attachment and responsibility. Right. But when I didn't have an additional person to really go into that initial reaction.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And usually, what it is it's when your career is going well, your finances are stable, you have a great friend group, your kids are doing well in school, you've been in the gym 4 times this week, you've lost 5 pounds, you look great in the red dress. Okay. It's the things we put into our own life that allows us to feel secure in ourselves and in our own life.
Yep.
Right. And most of my clients, when I ask them that question, will say, well, it was before this relationship, I can tell you that.
Okay.
Right. The thing that we need to understand is the toxic personality does not have the ability to put enough into their own life to ever achieve that feeling of self-security.
Yeah.
How do they make up for that? They place people strategically in their life that supply them with the things that make them feel secure.
Yep.
And, some of the toxic personalities are, some of the most successful CEOs. There are surgeons, there are attorneys, there are bank presidents, there are people that hold very esteemed positions. Okay, it doesn't matter how much money they have. It doesn't matter what position they hold. It doesn't matter how many friends they have. It doesn't matter how in shape they are. They will not ever put enough into their own life to feel secure. So they, like I said, put people in their life. So if you are in the life of a toxic personality, you are feeding them with the things that they need to feel secure. Because if you weren't, you wouldn't be in their life at any significant level.
Yeah.
And we already mentioned the things that they need to feel from other people throughout the day are things like control, power, attention, admiration. Because if they can feel those things from other people, they feel more secure in themselves. And it's very hard for us to wrap our head around that type of behavior because we don't think like that.
Well, and I think that's why, and I know part of your programs and your education is really all the understanding and awareness, but then the self-care and the next steps. And one of the things that I teach as well, and again, we just approach this from different angles, is really that priority. And I call it the self-care toolkit. If you can understand yourself and understand, and I'll actually comment on something you said earlier about how we respond to people. I would take that a step further going backwards. We don't respond, we react. We get on such autopilot of reaction. Response is a cognitive decision. That reaction is just that autopilot that we get into and we don't realize it. So that's where if we can take a step back and have our self-care toolkit and our plans, that's why mindfulness is so incredibly valuable, because it actually reteaches from a cellular level, rewires our brain, rewires our nervous system so that way we can manage this stress. And that's, again, that's a whole other conversation because of those autopilot reactions, that stress reaction that we get into, it's awful. And it's very, very scary.
Okay. So I want to talk about that.
Yeah.
Okay. Because on top of the fact that the toxic personality is insecure, okay, their goals through their life and through their day is to feel secure, right? Okay. The other aspect that most toxic people have, and I say most because I'm not going to be the one that says all, is they are emotionally abusive.
Okay.
Okay, so what is the definition of emotional abuse? I remember when I was in my former marriage, I had people telling me they thought I was in an emotionally abusive relationship. Okay, I'm so old, people, that this was before Google, so I didn't Google emotional abuse. But I remember thinking, well, yeah, he yells and he screams and he calls names and he's got a bad temper, but he does that every day.
Yeah.
So I don't really feel like, that's emotional abuse. Okay.
Yeah.
What emotional abuse is exactly what you were just talking about. It's when they can say or do something to elicit an emotional reaction out of you. So if they can say or do something that makes you happy, that makes you sad, that makes you frustrated, that makes you feel guilty, that makes you upset, that makes you mad. If they can say or do something that elicits an emotion out of you, They feel in control of your emotions, which makes them feel secure in themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to go back to when you were talking about the coworker
Mm-hmm.
and the competitiveness of the coworker.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we know that the toxic people have certain traits. You can Google personality traits of the toxic person, or you can Google red flags, or you can Google character traits or whatever. I teach 21 character traits when I work with people. Okay, we talk about the control, power, attention, and admiration. They use the character traits to achieve those 4 things from other people so they feel secure. And competition is actually one of the 21 character traits that I teach. So if you have somebody who's highly competitive and they're always wanting to win, and it might not even be big stuff. It might be stuff in work like they're competing for a position, but it might even be silly stuff like, I bet you don't know the lyrics to this song, right? Mm-hmm. They're always wanting to feel like they win, because when they win, they feel power, which makes them feel secure. Mm-hmm. So when you run into that personality in the workplace that's always competitive, and you always feel like you don't feel comfortable around that person, okay, their reason for competing with you isn't a clean, I'm really after this goal, this in my career. Their goal is, I need to beat you so I feel more secure.
Yep.
But once you understand that concept, rather than always bashing heads with them over this competing thing, you can sit back and go, well, they're just super competitive because they're feeling insecure today. Yeah. And it takes that emotional reaction out. Exactly. You know, the other example I like to use is, let's just take criticism. You know, one of the very, very congruent things that I hear from people nonstop is, I don't feel like I can do anything right. It doesn't matter what I do, it gets criticized. Okay. Newsflash, if you are in a relationship with a toxic person, or you have a toxic friend, you are never going to do anything right. It doesn't matter what you do. Why? Because if they can make you feel bad, they feel better, which makes them feel power, which makes them feel secure. And I remember some of the criticisms that I got from my former, and I remember in my head thinking, like, where does that even come from?
Yeah,
because,
right.
Like, in my head, I didn't feel like that. But the problem is we start believing them. And the reason we start believing them is because it is a slow drip. But we talked about emotional abuse and how we fall into this reactive cycle. Okay, they are continually seeking a reaction. So let's just say the criticisms or the name calling. If they come out one morning and they call you a name for the first time, what are you going to do? You're going to get upset, and you're going to feel hurt, and you're going to give them this big emotional reaction because they've never done that before.
But then something's wrong with you for having that kind of reaction.
Right. Yeah. But the second day, they're going to come out of the bedroom and they're going to call you the same name, and you're going to be upset again. But the 15th day that they come out of the bedroom and they call you the same name, you are now becoming desensitized to that. So we're not going to react, right? So they didn't get the reaction that they got by calling you that name the first day. So what do they have to do?
Now they have to do something else. Yeah.
Or they slam the door before they come out, because they're seeking a reaction so that they know they're in control of your emotions. All I have to do is say this or do this, and we get an emotional reaction.
Yeah.
Okay. So what we start doing is we start becoming very emotionally dependent on them, because we're paying attention to what they're saying. We're paying attention to what they're doing. We don't want to be criticized. We don't want to be called names. We don't want to be belittled. So we're like, okay, what are they going to do next? And what are they going to say? And we get very programmed that we give them a reaction or it's going to get worse. You know, and this is exactly how abuse escalates.
Yeah.
It can start very normal with name calling, but when you quit reacting, okay, then the names get meaner. And when you quit reacting to that, okay, they pick up a kitchen plate and smash it on the floor. That's going to get a reaction for a while. Okay, now you don't have a dish left because now they've been doing that. So now you're not reacting. So now they're locking you in rooms and blocking doorways and breaking your phone. And when you get used to that, then it escalates to pushing and shoving. And when you think about that from the perspective of what they're after, it's very clear. Yeah. They need a reaction so they feel in control and powerful. But we don't realize that. All we're trying to do is keep the peace.
Yeah.
So, you know, we get on this reactive cycle. So what I teach people is if we need to get them in a spot where we feel in control of the relationship, we have to quit feeding them with the things that they're seeking from us that are making them feel secure.
Mm-hmm.
Now, on the flip side, when we start withdrawing emotionally and not giving emotional reactions and stop allowing them to feel power and stop giving them attention, okay, they don't like that because we are taking control when we do that. So
that's very courageous and powerful, but then that puts them into an incredibly vulnerable spot.
Yes, and they feel a lot more insecure. So they have to turn up the volume then again.
Yeah.
And that's why people, they leave a toxic relationship and 6 months later they are right back in the same one.
Yeah.
And it's because the toxic personality is going to turn up the heat when they feel insecure. So they're going to do and say everything they can to get you back. And we think, oh, but they just love us so much and they're going to a counselor and they said they'd change and they've been nice. All they're doing is, it doesn't have anything to do with the relationship. It has 100% to do with the fact that they're feeling insecure and they need to feel that feeling of control over you again. So they're going to do and say whatever it is that they think they need to suck you back in so they feel secure. And 2 weeks later, it goes back to the exact same thing. And people leave and go back to toxic relationships all the time. I went back 7 times. And it was that same thing. We can't break up the family unit. I'll go to counseling. We'll start going to church. And then I think, because I'm emotional. They're really trying. I really want to believe the words that are coming out of their mouth. Well, now I'm looking back and I tell my clients, when this happens, I just want you to picture letters falling out of their mouth because the words don't mean anything. It's all driven by that feeling of the need for security in themselves.
Oh my gosh, this is so good. Are you kidding me? There's a gazillion other questions I have, but we're out of time. And it's like that gong that just went off and it's like, no, there's so much more to talk about. Heidi, first of all, I just want to say this in complete sincerity. I'm ridiculously proud of you for your journey and being courageous enough to not just talk about it, but to really talk about it in a way that does empower, educate, and help others. Because again, if I think about my own situations, I grew up in a physically abusive environment. So the emotional side, you don't have emotions. You're not supposed to have emotions. You're just supposed to be a robot and just survive. So toxic, in my mind, only meant really, really, really bad and physical stuff. And so when you really start unpacking this, some people might even think, oh my gosh, damn, am I a toxic person? Mm-hmm. Some people really might have some light to shine on them and say, why are these behaviors that I'm doing? And maybe I need to look at that. Okay. Not to say that that's a toxic person, but I think it's just that understanding.
Yes. And I should have said that at the beginning. Yeah. Everybody has toxic traits. Yes. We all have the capability of being toxic. So if you're wondering if the relationship that you're thinking about is toxic traits are repetitive and they're cyclic. What I know now is they use the same playbook every day because their motivation is the same every day. Yeah. But the scary part is toxic traits are contagious. Yes. Because I tried everything I could think of in 14 years to fix, to do, to be better, to be perfect, to be enough, all the way through. Okay, when you get to a certain point, you realize if you can't beat them, join them.
Well, it's just that mirroring, especially when you're an emotionally driven person, you start mirroring and you don't even realize it.
Yep. And I remember right before I left, all I did was yell at my kids. And I remember yelling and in my head going, why are you yelling?
Yeah.
And I had been trained to be a fighter because I never won a fight with him. And so that I took on these traits, and another trait I got was raising my voice.
Yeah.
That is something I to this day still struggle with. And it doesn't even mean I'm yelling, but when I get emotionally intense, I raise my voice. So other people think I'm yelling.
Yeah, right.
And that is a trait that I adopted within that environment because it was a fight fire with fire towards the end.
And it's just it's natural human behavior. And that's why you hear, the Jim Rohn quote, you become the 5 people you're surrounded by the most. And there is truth to you kind of take on the behavior of people that you're around, or the things you read, or the things that you watch.
Well, and then
So,
that's even more confusing to us because, now we feel like we're the toxic person. So now we're trying to fix it even more.
exactly. We're like, there is something wrong with me. See, I'm right. And that's why I mean, this is so good. So good. And coming back to what I was saying, I'm so proud of you. And thank you for being willing to tell your story, to share, and for your mission to be able to help educate as many as possible. Because at the end of the day, that's really the point, is there's nothing wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with me. There's nothing wrong with anybody that's listening. It's purely a matter of what awareness, what education, and now what skills and tools do you need so you can live a happy, fulfilled, and free life. Mm-hmm. So talk very quickly because we're really running out of time now. But, and I am so sorry, I hate doing that, but you have a couple tools on your site that really can help people start this process if they want to understand. Talk about that really quick.
Okay, so I do have a lot of resources. One of the ones that people find very validating is it's on my site. I think this is the one you're talking about. It's called the Toxicity Profile Analysis. Mm-hmm. And every one of my marketing people says, nobody's going to go on your website and take a quiz that's 106 questions. Okay, it is 106 questions. The reason I have it that way is it asks questions that correlate to the 21 character traits. Because if you're in a relationship and you're questioning whether this is toxic or not, I didn't realize that me being yelled at and name calling was even toxic because it happened every day. So people, even if you never talk to me and all you do is go take that test, just answering the questions are validating. Mm-hmm. Okay. I get different results than you get when you take that test. Each one of those questions correlates to one of the 21 character traits. And the reason I have it set up that way is because if somebody does book a consultation with me and I have those results, I know exactly what type of personality they're dealing with before I ever get on the phone with them. So, but it is very validating to go take the TPA, even if you never talk to me, because there's going to be questions that are going to make you go, oh, I didn't even realize that was abnormal behavior.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's kind of validating. I do have a support group on Facebook. I have a private support group because I have found that now, Heather, you and I can talk about this all day because we have both had experiences in this mm-hmm. type of relationship. Mm-hmm. But the people who have not experienced emotional abuse or toxic relationship will not understand it to the level that you and I understand it. And so and it's frustrating because some of your closest people, my mom and dad and my sisters, they knew it was bad, but they didn't know how to help me because they didn't understand it. And so the support group is called Strength Within. And I always say the cover photo is a white flower growing out of a gray rock because there's more than one strength within. But it's a community of people who you don't have to explain anything to. They're all in the same situation. They get it. And then you mentioned earlier, I do have a podcast. It's called It's Not Normal, It's Toxic. And it's on all the major platforms. You can get to it through my website as well. And I do private coaching.
So coachingwithdrheidi.com, coachingwithdrheidi.com. Take the TPA, otherwise known as a toxic relationship quiz, to really understand and identify and start to validate if or not you're feeling. The Facebook group is Strength Within, and the podcast, and I would highly, highly suggest people to go look up the podcast. It's Not Normal, It's Toxic, How to Rid Yourself of Toxic People. I love it. Heidi, I cannot thank you enough. Thank you for bearing with us as we went through our scheduling difficulties. And I knew this would be an amazing conversation. And I also knew that if we didn't have a hard stop, we really could.
Mm-hmm. I know.
And maybe we have a part 2 and a part 3. But again, I thank you. And I'm just so honored to know you. I'm so honored to see your evolution and all the amazing impact that you're making to people. So thank you for that.
Yes, thank you for having me. And I think I think that follow-ups are good because the people who are going to latch onto this are going to feel like there's so much more I want to know.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
Yeah. Well, they can get some of that at our future episode, but also at your podcast. It's not normal, it's toxic. All right, we're going to sign off for now. Thank you so much for listening. And you know how to stay in touch with us at the Go Reflect Yourself podcast. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Go Reflect Yourself. Please rate and review this episode. And if something moved you, please feel free to share. For more inspired action or to stay in touch, head on over to goreflectyourself.com or heatherjkreider.com. You can also take the growth mindset quiz and learn where your current growth mindset lies. Stay in touch on all social media at Heather J. Kreider. Until next time, this is your host, Heather Kreider, and I am challenging you to go reflect yourself so you can discover and become who you are meant to be.